I too wish to support this resolution for the vesting of these 2 parcels of land at Black Rock, and to join those who spoke before me in acknowledging the work of the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest and his leadership, as well as the Ministers of Housing who have contributed to making this a reality together with BADMC. Now, I noticed that the Honourable Minister of Agriculture started padding up early when he made reference to the land at the Pine Basin that we have spoken at length about. In fact, not only did he start padding up early, he took a single and put the Honourable Member for St. George South to face the bowling by making the recommendation very strongly to him that he complete the work of also having that land at Pine Plantation Road vested in the BADMC. For us to be able to do, as we have talked about for several years now, for us to be able to do a similar kind of project. And I just want to briefly remind the Chamber through you, sir, about the origin of that project. Now, I think it was as far back as 2016 when going through the constituency and coming up on that land and listening to residents in that area, and the area is interesting because it's residents of the Pine Gardens area, the area around by People's Cathedral, but also residents of Collimer Rock. So those residents form a corridor around that piece of land that has really several challenges. The challenges include the fact that for many, many years it would continue to be and stay overgrown. In the hottest months of the dry season, there would be brush fires that threaten the safety of residents and property. In the rainiest months of the year, there would be drainage issues. And in fact, one of the residents took it upon himself in collaboration with the Drainage Division of the Ministry of Transport and Works to be able to himself channel some of the water to make sure that it was not a threat to his property and to the neighboring properties. But apart from the issues with fire, with personal safety and security, because we know that overgrown areas in certain places also represent a potential hideout for people who may be seeking to avoid the authorities for several reasons, and we had heard about several of those cases, but also some of the drainage and flooding issues that attended. But on top of that, it was simply something that, sir, I hate to see in this business of governance, and that is a wasted asset. It really was just, and continues to be until we get the project going, a wasted asset, a tract of land that could go to use for people in the community that we have not been able to use. As a matter of fact, one resident, a lady in Collimer Rock, suggested to me when I visited her, she said, I really just want a little piece of land behind my paling to be able to plant some things. And really, just like how the gentleman who went to speak to the member for St. Michael Northwest started something in his mind, when she spoke, she also triggered something with us, that apart from potentially having an area in the foreground of that area at Pine Plantation Road that could be for recreation, because it is a pretty substantial area of land, that we could also have some community farming. And so this was the idea that I put to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture to ask how soon we could have this dealt with. In the interim, I do have to say thank you to both the team at Agriculture and the officers from Transport and Works, because they did do some work to level the area and at least to address the issue of safety and the overgrown trees and shrubs in the area. But apart from a wasted asset, sir, I also hate to see wasted resources, because the time and effort that it took to go and remove and clear that land, really, it was meant to be cleared to begin works. And so what we have now is a solution where it will become overgrown again. We are approaching the hurricane season. And we know that time is of the essence, and timing counts when it comes to being able to do these works, because we will have to go, we will have to clear the land, we will have to prepare the land. And I know that we had intended to have this area be used for shade houses. I was advised that the shade houses had arrived on island. I am waiting to hear then when we can have the vesting of these lands in BADMC, and then shortly thereafter, we can have those shade houses that have been earmarked for that area erected and in use. And in the much the same way that the member for St. Michael Northwest related the story to us of the young man who started the project, really, I also have, sir, to relate a story of a not so young man, but a gentleman who is a leader in his community with many of the young men in Carrington Village, who himself had approached me and said, is a similar situation, and it's amazing how similar these situations are. You know, these young men want to be able to come with me to do some farming. And I want to caution us too, sir, that we have to be practical. And while we know that things sometimes take time, people also don't have all the time that government has. People often don't have all the time that government has. People have to earn an income. And while, you know, sometimes when I talk to people and I'm not able to give them an immediate solution, but I know that one is coming because I am working with my colleagues to get one, I have to always say to them, I want you to hang in there. And if you feel that you're not hanging in there, I want you to pick up the phone and call me. Because I think sometimes we feel that, man, look, these things take time, you gotta wait, you gotta be patient. And yes, I think that many of the residents for whom we're responsible have a good relationship with patients. But sometimes it's out of your hands. And sometimes the need to be able to earn and even to be able to just simply feed yourself with what you are cultivating starts to overwhelm the other things. And so I note that the Honorable Member for St. Philip South, Honorable Minister of Agriculture, has taken in front by letting me know that this thing is at the top of the agenda, but we really do need to move this along, because I am concerned that another year has come, we are coming towards the hurricane season, and this unused asset remains fallow and remains a bit of a liability for the residents of the area. I was also heartened, sir, to hear, and I know that I am treating this almost as though it is a resolution from the Ministry of Agriculture, but I do want to take the opportunity to address some of the agricultural concerns and the remarks made by the Honourable Member before I come to the meat of the resolution. I was heartened to hear the approach to the feed program and the fact that those participants who have been trained and allocated land, who may not be in a position immediately to use that land, that land will be reassigned to others. And why? Sir, I've spoken in this honorable place before about constituents of mine who have been trained and who have not yet been allocated land and who are, again, waiting patiently. These individuals, sir, are not in full-time employment. And I'm curious to know as well this decision-making process. which sees people who are in full-time employment be allocated land ahead of those who are not. Because again, we have to be concerned with what is the level of income in each household. If I have household A that is already receiving an income and household B that is not, surely I must prioritize household B in terms of the allocation of resources. So I am encouraged to hear that there is an expiration date on these lands and cultivating them, and that if they're not used, that they will go to people who can make better use of them. But I also want to encourage us to pay some attention to the criteria that we're using for who is allocated land under the FEED program, because I do think that this is important. Sir, as I come to the meat of the resolution quickly, I want to start in the place that the member who led this resolution started. And he began by giving us quite extensive data on the issue of NCDs and some of the nutrition concerns that we have in this country, in this region, and in the world. And I was happy to hear his emphasis on data, because I had occasion just today, and I've said in this place before that we need to use evidence. I had occasion just today to point out to, or hopefully within earshot of, the gentleman who leads today, as of today, the Democratic Labour Party. Checking my watch because who knows what will happen. But I had occasion to point out that with respect to the question of loans and interest rates and so on, I'm on the question of data, sir. But with respect to that question, Appendix C of the Estimates of Revenue and Expenditure lists every single loan under which this government is contracted. Not only does it list the loan, not only does it list outstanding amounts, it also lists in the notes the interest rate amortization for every single loan. Further to that, loan contracts of the Caribbean Development Bank, the Latin American Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and several other institutions with which governments has loan arrangements are laid in this honorable chamber. And I had to say to those who were calling for these hot and sweaty calls in the public space for information that is on the Parliament website, that if you go in and do a keyword search, LOAN, loan, I just did it right here, sir, you will find a list, LOAN, loan, of all of the loan contracts that have been laid in this place. So before we go making all kinds of claims and calls, and that gentleman likes to call things and people hot and sweaty, but this seems pretty hot and sweaty to me. Do a search, and you will find the information that you are looking for. So that was just to emphasize the importance of data and evidence as I continue to support this resolution. But I want to start on the question of NCDs. And the honorable member talked about the importance of this kind of project where we are growing food, people are growing food for themselves. He spoke about how he used to eat food from neighbors and from the backyard. My mother had a kitchen garden. I've talked about it all the time. My mother, helped support us on that kitchen garden and fed us from that kitchen garden. You couldn't sit down at the table, sir, without her. Sometimes we would try to avoid going and getting some lettuce from outside. We used to put it in the middle of the table and break it off, like how people break off bread. Break off a leaf at a time. No fancy salads or anything. That's just how we used to do it. And we were able to go and make sure that we got healthy food in that way. And he also talked about some of the other things that we need to do. And I'm constantly going back to some of the things that have been a part of the manifesto of this Barbados Labour Party administration. One of those things is the idea of wealth for health. Wealth for Health. Those grants and the evidence suggests that it is cheaper for a state, for a government, to reward people for taking care of themselves than it is to try to fix all of the NCDs through dialysis, amputations, through having to find prosthetic limbs, all of this care that you rush in with after the fact, that costs the state so much. A fraction of that could go into, before the fact, helping to reward people who are sticking to their treatment protocol, who are taking their medication on time, who are exercising, who are tracking their food and eating well. These are the kinds of things that we are realizing call for far less investment for much bigger output, much bigger impact when it comes to chronic non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and so on. I do hear the call for a Caribbean calorie counter, which couldn't hurt, but I again caution that, when I go on this device and I go on one of several apps and I put in cornmeal cuckoo, I can find cornmeal cuckoo. When I put in cassava pone, I can find cassava pone. So I don't want people of Barbados to believe that this data does not exist. I don't want us to hide behind the fact that there is not yet something called a Caribbean calorie counter to cause us to not do the right thing or not be able, or say that we don't know how much is in there, because we can find out the data is there. Now, some of us may have to correct the data if it's not accurate. Some of us may have to say, well, we're gonna add breadfruit cuckoo to the cornmeal cuckoo because that's the one that I prefer, personally. But I don't want to give the impression that we are waiting for something, because we have enough to be able to start improving some of our habits. And similarly, something that we don't talk much about, and that's the question of portion sizes. That's the question of portion sizes. And I think that when it comes to being able to afford to eat well, we say this thing as a blanket statement: it is expensive to eat healthy. We say it over and over, and we believe it. But in fact, a lot of the sizes, the portion sizes that we are consuming, are far beyond the amount of food that we need to eat. So there's some places I go and I buy food, and I have to take it home and eat the rest later, because there's no way that that is the amount of food that a woman of my size should be eating for lunch. And if we have a system where we say, listen, just like the Americans do with all the fast food, let's try it here with Bajan food. To say to people, look, a standard portion is this amount, a handful, the size of my hand, of the palm of my hand. That is a serving of most things. Potato, cassava, rice, that's a serving size. And if we say a standard portion size, for you to buy that from me, the vans that go on the construction sites and so on, is $6. Now, if you want upsize, it's gonna cost you more. I don't know if you can afford it. If you want to upsize to a large portion, it's gonna cost you $12. And then we will see how much more affordable it is to eat the amount of food that you require to sustain yourself in the body in which you walk around on this planet. Because we think that we need to go and pile up. Even when I was growing up, sir, I noticed that my father's a small man, but we have this notion that we gotta feed the men more. And you see the plate that would be stacked up high, a mountain of food. And really the truth is that most of us, especially small Caribbean people, don't need that amount of food at one serving. So it's not just about these food choices. I hear people all this thing about sweet potato versus white potato. Yeah, sweet potato got some more vitamin A, but pound for pound is about the same number of calories. Let us really give people real information about food. real information about food. And it comes down a lot. Yesterday I was at the Barbados Workers Union May Day thing, and I told a colleague of mine, don't give me any fish cakes. But when people say he jerked them in my hand, I didn't want to make you feel bad. But I ate one. I didn't need to eat 8. I may have wanted to, but I didn't need it. And so the idea of what do we need to sustain our bodies and to perform, food as fuel, these are all of the ideas that I know the Honorable Minister of State and the Ministry of Health and others are working with. But I think that we need to start to tie the economics of it to the portion sizes and to really what is it that we need to sustain ourselves. Because a lot of the things that we think we need, people say it's hard to eat healthy. Protein shakes cost a lot of money. You don't need a protein shake to eat healthy. You don't need to set foot in a health food store to eat healthy. Everything that you need, you can grow, you can catch in a yard, a yard fowl or a piece of fish, and sustain yourself. Sir, I also want to consider and respond to the intervention of the honourable member who led this resolution with respect to the balance of development. He quite rightly and quite sincerely made the observation that there needs to be a balance of land development between housing and agriculture, and I would go further to say commercial development and other things. And, you know, for years there has been this tension. I am aware that the government has developed, has built on the existing physical development plan as a part of the Ministry of Planning and Development to be able to make some sense of the limited land space that we have. I really think that this revised physical development plan needs to be before us, because that is what guides a lot of the planning decisions that are made. Planning is hot in the news this week, sir, for all kinds of reasons. But I think that having that document before Barbadians will help them to understand when government makes certain decisions about the use of land, what is guiding that? The physical development plan is really saying to you, this is the amount of land that we must have in agriculture in order to attain food security or food sovereignty or whatever are the targets of that sector. This is the amount of land that we must have for energy in order to meet the 2030 Barbados energy policy or to hit whatever targets have been redeveloped as part of that policy. This is the amount of land we need in manufacturing. This is the amount of land we need, and so on. So that when decisions are made, people understand that we are talking about a balance of land use to make sure that we are developing in a coherent way and bringing everyone with us and having them be a part of that development. And I have to take this opportunity in that regard then, sir, to acknowledge something that I have called for over and over and over and over and over in this honorable place. And to thank the Prime Minister, the Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast, and the Cabinet for heeding my calls to complete the business of the transfer of resources to the Urban Development Commission to address the issue of transfer of title of tenantry land in urban areas. Because you see, sir, as you well know, the business of urban development is that everything must happen all at once in the same limited land space. And so by having that transfer of resources, and it is before somebody calls now out there for the evidence that this has happened, it was a subject of a resolution here, the 3.1 million that was transferred to the Urban Development Commission for what I call the continuation of the legacy of Tom Adams with respect to the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act that we cannot lose sight of. The landmark piece of legislation that afforded Barbadians the right to own their land. We are talking about former tenantry land that was owned by white slave owners in this country. And having people rightfully own that and be able to use it as an asset. And so I do want to officially say thank you to the cabinet, to the government, for putting the Urban Development Commission in a position to continue that work within urban Barbados, because it's about ownership of land, it is about being able to use land for farming. It is a confluence of things that must happen at once on the limited land space that we have.
I don't remember, has 2 more minutes.
I don't even need that, sir. I support this resolution wholeheartedly. I am excited to see what will happen here, but far more excited to see what will happen before the end of the year in Pine Plantation Road. I've already offered to write some documents if you all need some writing done. I think that the proposal is sound. The people are waiting. And sometimes we say in this place, I'm going to do X for the member for St. James South. I'm going to do X for the member for St. Michael West. You're doing it for us, you know. You're doing it for the people of Barbados, for whom we are advocates. And I want us to always have that in mind, that people are waiting for their futures to start. And I encourage us to help them start those futures. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.